Has the ROCOR preserved its apostolic succession by always being in communion with the new calendarists? Nevertheless, the report of Father Konstantin Fedorov is a very interesting document. We will refer to it repeatedly, since many provisions of the report require discussion and understanding, both on our part and probably on the part of the ROCOR. Fee. Here, for example, Father Konstantin writes, "We have to admit that the attitude of the ROCOR to the new style was unclear. We understood and understand that the new style is unacceptable for the Orthodox, but nothing more. There was no understanding of the new calendarism as an apostate phenomenon. There was no understanding that the new calendarism is a challenge to the Church of Christ of the same order as Sergianism and ecumenism. Our Church needs to give a clear, conciliar assessment of the new calendarism and the new calendarists. We need to admit that the lukewarm attitude in the ROCOR to the new calendarism was a mistake on the part of some, and an evil intent on the part of others. That many could not get rid of the false concepts of tolerance that had formed during the synodal period, that is, of imaginary love without truth. That for many in the ROCOR in the 1920s, it was not obvious that the new style was a trampling on the Fathers' tradition, that this a concession to the Roman Catholics and Protestants, that with the introduction of the new calendar, the involvement of Orthodox Christians in the abyss of ecumenism and Freemasonry began. Unfortunately, communication with the new calendarists was not interrupted. This is all very true. Nevertheless, recognizing that the new calendarist movement is equivalent to both Sergianism and ecumenism, in Greece, by the way, we do not distinguish between these concepts of ecumenism and new calendarist movement, and recognizing that the ROCOR never interrupted Eucharistic communion with the new calendarists, how can one then say that the ROCOR preserved the apostolic succession intact? And by the way, the question arises about the Matthewites, who were in communion with the ROCOR in 1971 to 76. It is quite obvious that the portion of poison received from communication with the ROCOR in those years led to a catastrophic crisis and schisms among the Matthewites themselves, which have not been overcome to this day. How should one evaluate the fact of communion between the Church of the True Orthodox Church of Greece and the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, which in turn is in communion with the heretical ecumenist, new calendarists? Even the fact of the chirothesia is of no importance here. Even if the true Orthodox Church of Greece had entered into communion with the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia without any chirothesia, the very fact of Eucharistic communion with a church mired in unorthodoxy is catastrophic.
No, actually it was clear. In words they disagreed with it, saying it's a mistake. In deeds they were ordaining new calendarist bishops. They were in communion with new calendarist ecumenists, and they never officially broke communion with them, even after they issued the 1983 anathema. That's why they verbally agreed with the Matthewite Confession of Faith in 1971, and they promised to correct their new calendarists, but in practice, they had no issues to concelebrate and keep communion with new calendarists. In their ambiguous Cyprianity decision from 1974, it is characteristic for what ROCOR really represented. That's the reason why the Matthewites stopped communion with them. And Rose wrote that some old calendarists have anathematized ROCOR for that decision. Well, they surely deserve that.